The Aikenwale household was in an uproar that morning, but not the kind that stemmed from conflict. This was the noise of excitement, the buzz of adventure, the giddy thrill of the unknown. Dressed in their finest attires, the entire family looked like a parade of royalty preparing for a grand procession. The energy in the air was electric. It was the kind of enthusiasm one only saw in primary school pupils going on a picnic on Christmas Day or high school students embarking on an excursion. Everyone was ready to impress. And, of course, oppress. The convoy had been arranged meticulously, 8 luxurious vehicles, each one a gleaming symbol of wealth and power. Rolls-Royces, Bentleys, Range Rovers, a Mercedes Maybach, and even a rare custom-built BMW, all polished to perfection, stood proudly in the driveway, awaiting their passengers. Aikenwale's father, the self-proclaimed general of the operation, stepped forward with a smug smile. "Rhoda will ride with me," he declared, his voice thick with self-importance. "We will lead the convoy." A murmur of agreement rippled through the gathering, though Aikenwale's mother seemed slightly unsettled by how quickly her husband was warming up to Rhoda. She glanced at Rhoda, trying to decipher the young woman's expression, but Rhoda's face was unreadable. Before anyone could step into their assigned vehicles, a loud, excited voice rang through the air. "Wait, wait, wait. Auntie Rhoda hasn't finished her story." It was Folktales, her eyes wide with anticipation. A collective groan of realization swept through the group. "Oh!" They all chorused in unison, their voices rising and falling as though they had rehearsed it in a choir. "Before you interrupted us with your contract." Laughter exploded from every corner. Even Aikenwale, who had been uncharacteristically quiet, chuckled at the unexpected comedy. Rhoda simply folded her arms, watching them with an amused expression. "Well, it's not like my story is running away," she teased. "But weow," Adewale interjected, already making his way toward the vehicles. "To the journey of our lives." With that, the grand convoy roared to life, and the never-to-be-forgotten journey began. The moment they hit the road, it became apparent that this was no ordinary visit. The streets of Lagos, usually chaotic and bustling, seemed to pause in admiration as the convoy sliced through the city like a procession of monarchs. Pedestrians stopped to gawk, motorists slowed down, and traders on the roadside abandoned their wares to take in the sight of wealth in motion. Inside the lead limousine, Rhoda sat comfortably beside Aikenwale's father, her posture relaxed, her mind several steps ahead of the unfolding drama. She knew exactly what she was doing. The Aikenwales thought they were about to meet a woman from a humble background, a woman who had raised the laziest girl in town, someone they could scrutinize, evaluate, and ultimately judge. What they didn't know was that she had orchestrated this entire event for a reason. They were walking into a carefully laid trap, and they would never see it coming. As they sped toward their destination, Folktales, who was seated in the car behind them, leaned toward the tinted window, shaking her head in disbelief. "Can you imagine?" she whispered to Adewale. "This is the same Rhoda I used to badmouth. The same woman I once called arrogant and overrated. And now she just signed my contract as if it was nothing. I still can't believe it." Adewale smirked. "Well, life has a way of humbling us, doesn't it?" Folktales nodded, deep in thought. "Please subscribe." But if she thought she had been humbled already, she had no idea what was waiting for them at the end of this journey. After nearly an hour on the road, the convoy finally began to slow down. Aikenwale's father, expecting to see a modest house in an average neighborhood, straightened his suit and prepared himself for the usual patronizing speech reserved for occasions like this. Something about how we all come from humble beginnings and must never forget our roots. But as they turned into a private estate with towering gates, his rehearsed speech dissolved into thin air. This is a private estate," Aikenwale's mother whispered, her brows furrowed. "Maybe they work here," one of the sisters suggested uncertainly. Rhoda smirked. The gates swung open without hesitation, without anyone even stopping to ask who they were. The convoy drove in smoothly, greeted by perfectly manicured lawns, intricate water fountains, and towering mansions that looked like something out of an architectural fantasy. Aikenwale's father's confusion deepened. "Wait a minute," he muttered. "This is the type of place where billionaires live." And then it hit them. They were not just visiting any random woman. They were walking into the home of someone powerful, someone far above their status. Aikenwale's mother suddenly felt lightheaded. Folktales, who had been daydreaming about her music career, nearly choked on her own breath. "Jesus Christ," she whispered. The realization sent a ripple of shock through the entire convoy. The cars finally pulled up in front of the grandest mansion in the entire estate. The doors of the vehicles swung open, but for the first time that morning, no one rushed out. No one moved. Even Aikenwale, usually calm and composed, found himself gripping the edge of his seat. Rhoda, on the other hand, exuded nothing but calm confidence. She unbuckled her seatbelt, turned to Aikenwale's father, and, with a slow smile, delivered the final blow. "Welcome to my mother's house." Dead silence. And just like that, the Aikenwales realized they were not the royalty in this story. They were the spectators, the prey. And Rhoda, she was the hunter. The atmosphere in the convoy was suffocating. Not because of the Lagos heat, not because of exhaustion from the long journey, but because the entire Aikenwale family was struggling to process what had just happened. Rhoda, the girl they had all dismissed, the girl they had ridiculed, had just casually dropped them into a world of wealth so vast that it made even their riches look like pocket change. And now, they were standing before the grandest mansion they had ever seen, not as owners, but as guests, as outsiders. The mansion's doors had yet to open when a tall, broad-shouldered man emerged from the gates. His posture was sharp, his uniform crisp, a man accustomed to giving and receiving orders. His presence alone radiated discipline, the kind found only in the military or among men trained to guard kings and presidents. He walked straight to Rhoda, stopping just a few feet away from her, and with a deep, formal bow, he addressed her in a tone that was both reverent and regretful. "I deeply apologize, but Madam is not around. She traveled to the United States of America 6 months ago." The moment he spoke, Aikenwale's father and mother stiffened in shock. The United States of America? 6 months ago. The realization was like a slap to their faces. The woman they thought was just a local market woman, the mother of a lazy girl, had traveled abroad for 6 months without so much as a whisper of it reaching them. Even they didn't just pack up and disappear overseas for half a year without people noticing. But before their thoughts could spiral further, the security man, still standing at perfect attention, added, "I thought you were aware." Without a flicker of concern, Rhoda simply stretched her arms above her head and yawned. A slow, deliberate yawn. Then, shaking her head slightly as if amused, she turned to the security man and replied in the laziest, most nonchalant tone imaginable. "Oh, I know. I just brought my new family here so they can know one of the places to find my mum in case they ever need her." A collective silence fell over the Aikenwale family. Rhoda's words were innocent on the surface, but the weight of their meaning sent an invisible punch to every single one of them. She had called them her new family. They had come here expecting to inspect her background, to evaluate her worth, to judge if she was truly worthy of Aikenwale. But instead, they were the ones being introduced to her world. They were not here as her judges. They were her guests. And they knew it. Aikenwale's father, his face betraying his barely concealed annoyance, cleared his throat and attempted to regain control of the situation. He turned to Rhoda with the kind of forced politeness one uses when they feel outmatched but refuse to acknowledge it. "Is this our?" Before he could finish, Rhoda turned to him with a slow, knowing smile. She cut him off effortlessly, her voice laced with calculated amusement. "Daddy," she said smoothly, "this is my biological mother's house, the one that made me lazy." She let that statement sink in before continuing, her tone dripping with playful mischief. "Now, let me take you to Irresistible house. Our next destination is the house of my foster mother, the one that gave me the charm with which I, jazzed your son, making all of you unable to snatch him away from me." If silence could scream, the one that followed her words would have shattered the sky. The entire Aikenwale family stood frozen, their expressions caught between shock, confusion, and the desperate need to suppress any reaction that might later require them to apologize to this idiot. "Please subscribe." Folake blinked. Adiwale ran a hand over his face. Aikenwale's mother? Stunned beyond words. Even Aikenwale's father, who prided himself on always having the last word, found himself speechless. And then, out of nowhere, Aikenwale threw his head back and laughed. Not a chuckle, not a smirk, a full-bodied, unapologetic, roaring laugh. Then, still grinning, he turned toward his car, opened the door, and with a voice full of excitement, announced, "I can't wait to meet the woman that gave me this lady, the woman who gave me my peace." Without another word, he jumped into the driver's seat, ignited the engine, and with a sharp, commanding gesture, motioned for his father's driver to follow him. Still reeling from the shock, the rest of the Aikenwell family turned to take one last look at the mansion, the house that had completely shattered their expectations. A mansion so grand, so flawless, so perfectly sculpted, it looked less like a house and more like a gigantic wedding cake. And in that moment, they realized something. Their father's car, which had once felt like the ultimate symbol of wealth, of class, of power, now looked like a cheap toy. And so, with heavy hearts and reluctant steps, they climbed into their vehicles, following their son as he led them to the next chapter of this never-to-be-forgotten journey. Destination, Irresistible house. Inside the air-conditioned comfort of Aikenwell's father's car, the silence was thick, not with hostility, but with an unfamiliar weight, an unspoken shift in power. Rhoda, sitting with effortless ease in the back seat, quietly directed the driver, her voice calm and assured, as if she had been giving instructions in this family long before today. Aikenwell's father, his fingers drumming absently on his knee, cleared his throat. He had never been a man to hesitate when he wanted to know something. And so, with a humility he wasn't used to expressing, he finally asked, "Rhoda, what's your true name? Is it Rhoda or Arike?" For the first time, Rhoda glanced at him. Her expression was unreadable, her lips parting slightly as if she was about to respond. But then, her eyes flickered toward the road, and in an instant, her entire demeanor changed. Her head snapped toward the driver. "Wait. Stop. We've missed the turn." The driver startled, gripping the wheel tightly. "Madam, you missed the junction. We were supposed to turn right back there. You need to reverse and turn back immediately." The driver's foot hesitated on the brakes, his eyes darting to the rearview mirror. But the problem wasn't just their car. The convoy was no longer intact. Other vehicles, strangers' cars, had come between them and the rest of Aikenwell's family. The luxurious convoy that had started like a disciplined military procession was now fragmented, scattered along the road like chess pieces knocked out of formation. Rhoda clicked her tongue in frustration. "We have to find a way to inform the others before they go too far ahead." But before she could even reach for her phone, another problem emerged. Adewale's car, which had been a few vehicles behind, suddenly jerked violently. Then, it let out a loud, disturbing clank. And then, it stopped. Completely. Mechanical failure. Aikenwell's father exhaled sharply, rubbing his temples as if nursing an oncoming headache. "What is this nonsense?" he muttered. Adewale, who had quickly stepped out to inspect the situation, banged the side of the car in frustration. "Baba, the car is dead." Aikenwell's father narrowed his eyes. "What do you mean by dead? You drove it out of the house this morning. How is it dead?" "I don't know. It just stopped." The road they were on wasn't exactly empty, but neither was it bustling with help. If they were in the heart of the city, mechanics would have been lined up on the roadside, waiting for an opportunity to make a quick buck. But here, they would have to call for help. The situation turned chaotic for the next 30 minutes. Calls were made. A mechanic was contacted. Adewale had to park the car at a safe spot. The keys were handed over to Aikenwell's father's driver, who was instructed to stay back with the mechanic. And finally, Adewale himself had to switch cars, taking over as the new driver of his father's vehicle. By the time the entire mess was finally sorted out, it was almost noon. And something else became painfully obvious. They were all getting hungry. Folake, in particular, let out a dramatic sigh. "I knew we should have packed food before leaving the house. Now, look at us. Stranded and starving like village children on a lost excursion." Rhoda, who had been watching everything unfold with mild amusement, finally spoke up. "Well, you all came dressed to oppress. Now, you're suffering to impress." The sharp comment caught Aikenwell's father off guard. He turned to her with narrowed eyes. "What does that mean?" Rhoda only smiled. She leaned back into her seat, stretched her arms over her head, and in a voice dripping with satisfaction, said, "Don't worry. I know exactly where to take you for lunch." Aikenwell's father leaned back in his seat and exhaled. The delay had stretched longer than expected, and now his stomach was making its own demands. He turned toward Rhoda and asked, "So, what do we do now? Lunch or we continue our journey?" Rhoda barely turned her head as she responded, "Well, Daddy, that depends. If you want to continue, prepare for at least 2 more hours on the road." Aikenwell and his father exchanged looks. 2 hours. "Let's eat first," Aikenwell decided without hesitation. His father nodded. "Yes, Let's. The only issue is, he hesitated, tapping his fingers against his knee. Akin, where do you suggest? I can't even remember the last time I ate outside. Aikenwale smirked. That's because you don't eat outside, Barber. The only problem is the crowd. The moment we step into any restaurant, it will be chaos. Eyes will be on us, and trust me, once word gets out, it will turn into a full-blown scene. Adiwale, who had been silent for a while, chuckled. Then we had better find a good hotel. The hoteliers will assume we came for a wedding reception. Aikenwale's father found that amusing and laughed heartily. That's true. People will start assuming we came for a big occasion. Maybe we should all act like we're here for an engagement party. Rhoda, who had been listening lazily, suddenly smirked. Adiwale turned to her. My piece, do you know any good hotel around here? Without lifting her head, Rhoda responded with a slow drawl. If you don't mind. Aikenwale grinned. Show the way. Rhoda stretched and yawned. Then, with an air of mischief, she replied. But before we go, let's make one thing clear. Inform the rest of the convoy that this was your idea. Tell them I have nothing to do with it. Aikenwale frowned playfully. Why? Rhoda leaned closer and whispered. Because whatever happens next, you can't blame me. Aikenwale pulled back slightly, his eyes narrowing in curiosity. What exactly does that mean? But Rhoda only smiled, looking out the window as though she hadn't just dropped a cryptic warning. Aikenwale let out a short laugh. He wasn't sure if she was joking or serious, but there was no time to probe further. He reached for his phone and, without further delay, called the rest of the convoy. New development, change of plans. We're turning back for lunch. It's a 10-minute ride. Follow my lead. There was no protest. In fact, a wave of relief swept through the convoy, especially for Uncle Philip, a man whose stomach was his most treasured possession. As the convoy turned back toward the new location, Aikenwale's father threw a sideways glance at Rhoda. There was something about the way she leaned into her seat. The way she seemed too comfortable, too amused. Aikenwale, too, was beginning to notice the strange twinkle in her eyes. They had no idea what they were about to walk into. But Rhoda did. And she was enjoying every second of it. The final turn was smooth, too smooth. Aikenwale's father frowned slightly as he noticed the sudden change in the landscape. The road stretched before them like a newly unrolled carpet, its asphalt pristine, untouched, almost surreal. It gleamed under the sun as though it had been poured just that morning, waiting to be unveiled like a royal secret. On either side of the road, the scenery had transformed into something out of a European dream. Palm trees stood proudly, their young fronds swaying with aristocratic grace. Ornamental shrubs, trimmed to absolute perfection, lined the streets like royal guards. Flowers of every color imaginable bloomed as though they had been personally invited to impress the convoy. It felt like they had just stepped into another country entirely. Adiwale was the first to voice the thought swirling in everyone's mind. Wait, are we still in Nigeria? Please subscribe. The question hung in the air like a puzzle no one could solve. Another voice echoed in disbelief. Wow, 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 what is this place? The further they drove, the more intimidated they became. They had all dressed to impress. But suddenly, they felt underdressed. Aya Arike Intercontinental Hotel. And then, they saw it. The hotel. But not just any hotel. Aikenwale's father swallowed hard, his heart slamming against his ribs as he stared at the massive signage that hung in the sky like a celestial pronouncement. Aya Arike Intercontinental Hotel. Silence. Pure. Deafening. Silence. Nobody moved. Nobody breathed. For the first time in their lives, the Adiwales had encountered something beyond their imagination. Their heads tilted back, their mouths slightly parted as their eyes traveled across the architectural masterpiece before them. And then, like royalty stepping into a sacred temple, they slowly emerged from their vehicles. But before they could even gather themselves, a fleet of bank protocol officers rushed out of the hotel. Their presence was angelic, their dresses cherubic, their demeanor so flawlessly professional that even Aikenwale's father, a man accustomed to power, felt small. They moved in perfect synchrony, their footsteps silent yet commanding, their manners so graceful it almost felt unreal. And then, before anyone could recover from this dreamlike trance, a ferociously beautiful lady emerged from the hotel's grand entrance. She didn't walk. She glided. And before anyone could process her ethereal presence, she let out a breathless exclamation and ran straight to Rhoda. Auntie Rhoda, you never called to inform us you were coming. There was no question in her tone, only excitement, deep reverence, and pure joy. Rhoda, as expected, simply yawned. Casually, lazily. Then, stretching her arms as though she had just woken up from a nap, she shrugged and responded with practiced nonchalance. "We're on our way home to my mummy, but my family and I got hungry, so I decided to bring them here for a meal before we continue our voyage." The moment the words left her lips, the beautiful lady, without hesitation, without inquiry, without a second thought, made a subtle blink toward one of the hotel staff standing nearby, and in a single, fluid motion, more than half of them disappeared into the hotel. No words exchanged. No orders given. Just a glance. That was all it took. Aikenwale's breath hitched. And then he took a step forward. Closer. His eyes widened in shock as his brain struggled to match what he was seeing with what he had known before. "F.A. Deku?" His voice was barely above a whisper. And then, louder, as though trying to convince himself. "Fadik, is this you, or am I mistaken? Are my eyes deceiving me?" The lady turned to face him fully, her radiant beauty only amplified by the golden rays of the afternoon sun. Before she could speak, Rhoda's voice cut through the tension like a sharp blade. "This is Fadik. She is the first daughter of Ayera Reich. She is my friend. And she is also the younger sister of Samuel, my lecturer." A collective gasp rippled through the Ediwale family. And then, Aikenwale's mother clutched her chest and let out an exasperated wail. "Ha! Ha! Rhoda, you will not kill us. Please subscribe." Rhoda lazily stretched and yawned again. "Mummy, it's not my fault. Ask Aikenwale and Daddy, they caused all this." That was all she said before Fadik, with a knowing smile, gracefully extended her hand and motioned them forward. "Now, let me take you on a proper tour of the finest establishment in this country. Welcome to Ayera Reich Intercontinental Hotel." With effortless elegance, she led them through the golden-framed glass doors, and the moment they stepped inside, the sheer opulence of the lobby stole their breath away. The lobby stretched endlessly, a kingdom of gold and marble. A massive chandelier, dripping with Swarovski crystals, cascaded from the ceiling like a waterfall of diamonds. The floor was Italian marble, polished to a mirror sheen, reflecting the grandeur above. Everywhere, attendants moved like celestial beings, dressed in crisp designer uniforms, their smiles perfectly calibrated to exude warmth and exclusivity. Fadik turned to them with a satisfied smirk. "You are standing in the heart of Africa's most luxurious hotel. Every corner of this establishment breathes elegance and world-class hospitality. From presidents to billionaires, this is where the elite escape to experience true paradise." She gestured towards the concierge desk, where two uniformed gentlemen stood at attention. Personal butlers are assigned to every VIP guest upon arrival. Whatever you need, before you even think of it, we have already provided it. Aikenwale's father blinked, as if trying to process the overwhelming magnificence before him. Fadik led them to a private elevator, where a biometric scanner unlocked access to the presidential wing. As the doors slid open on the top floor, an entire world unfolded before them. She swept an arm toward the suites. These are not just rooms, they are experiences. Each suite is a masterpiece, designed by the world's best architects and interior designers. Every inch is curated for royalty. The doors of the royal penthouse suite swung open to reveal floor-to-ceiling glass walls overlooking the city skyline, a private infinity pool stretching into the horizon, an ultra-modern living room adorned with hand-picked African and European art, a master bedroom draped in Egyptian cotton sheets softer than a lover's whisper. Rhoda yawned again, clearly unfazed by the splendor. "Not bad, Fadik, not bad." Fadik ignored her and continued. "Every suite comes with a private chef, personal butler, chauffeur-driven Rolls-Royce, and access to our exclusive rooftop helipad." The moment they entered the cinema halls, Aikenwale's uncle, Philip, gasped audibly. "Ah, this is not a cinema, this is paradise." Fadik chuckled. Ayera Reich Intercontinental is home to Africa's first 5-star private movie theater. Each hall is soundproof, fitted with 4D technology, and seats recline into full beds. She waved a hand, and an attendant brought in freshly popped gourmet popcorn served in 24-karat gold-plated bowls. Philip wasted no time, grabbing a handful and sighing like a man who had just met his soulmate. Leading them into the culinary haven of the hotel, Fadek's voice took on a seductive edge. "Here, we don't just serve meals, we serve memories. Every bite is a journey. Our menu is curated by Michelin-starred chefs who have worked in Paris, Tokyo, and Dubai. They walked past a glass-walled wine cellar, boasting the rarest wines and champagnes from across the globe. Whatever your taste, African, Asian, French, Italian, we create magic on a plate. We have a floating restaurant on our artificial lake, a private dining lounge in the sky, and for our most exclusive guests, we bring the restaurant to their suite. Aikenwale's father, overwhelmed, pulled out his handkerchief to wipe his face. Soft instrumental music greeted them as they entered Africa's most expensive spa. "Hey," Fadik announced, "we offer treatments fit for gods. Our spa packages include 24-karat gold facials, diamond body scrubs, and the rarest essential oils flown in from the most exotic locations." Aikenwale's mother, who had been silent all through the tour, sank into one of the luxurious chairs and whispered, "I need this in my life. Please subscribe." Finally, they entered the grand ballroom. And this was where Aikenwale lost all control. A room so massive, so mesmerizing, that it seemed fit for celestial gatherings. The ceilings soared, adorned with intricate gold carvings. The marble floors stretched endlessly, and at the far end, a stage stood, waiting to host history. Fadek's voice softened. "Presidents have waltzed here. Royalty has dined here. The biggest weddings in Africa have been sealed here." Aikenwale exhaled sharply, his decision made. He turned to Fadik. "I don't need to think twice. My engagement, my wedding, will happen here." A stunned silence fell over the family. Then, a loud cry of excitement erupted from everyone, except Aikenwale's mother. She was lost in deep, deep thought. And somewhere in the depths of her mind, she asked herself the question she had been too afraid to voice. Who, truly, is Rhoda? Aikenwale's mother stood frozen, staring at Rhoda as though seeing her for the first time. The air in the grand ballroom had changed. The celebration, the marvel, the astonishment. Suddenly, everything paled in comparison to the one question burning in her heart. Slowly, she stepped forward, her voice soft, almost pleading. "Rhoda, who are you? And why have you decided to treat us this way? To mesmerize us?" Her eyes searched Rhoda's face. "It is obvious now. You own this hotel. So why? Why did you name it Aya Reich Intercontinental Hotel rather than Rhoda Hotel?" Before Rhoda could part her lips to answer, a confident yet gentle voice cut in. "Fadik." She stepped forward, tilting her chin, her tone both proud and emotional. "Mummy, let me answer on her behalf." All eyes turned to her. She took a deep breath. "This entire legacy was built in honor of my mother, a woman nicknamed Aya Reich, by Auntie Rhoda herself. A name Rhoda chose with her whole heart, to call her adopted mother." The room was utterly silent. Fadik continued. "It all started 2 years ago. My brother," she swallowed hard, pain flashing in her eyes. "He dumped Rhoda for his ex-girlfriend. The same woman who jilted him before, the same woman who later returned and pretended to love him again. He reconciled with her and married her." She turned slightly toward Aikenwale's father. "When I told my mother about my role in bringing Rhoda and my brother together, I was heartbroken. I blamed myself. Because of me, Rhoda, my friend, my boss, my sister, had lowered herself, stooped down, and accepted my brother's love despite his low status. And what did he do in return? He shattered her heart." Fadek's voice cracked slightly, but she took a steadying breath and continued. "But the part that stunned my mother the most was what happened afterward. Instead of being bitter, instead of seeking revenge or even wishing him ill, do you know what Rhoda did? She turned to Aikenwale's mother. She still gave him a huge sum of money. She still helped him with his travel plans. She funded his trip to the United States of America." Gasps echoed through the room. Aikenwale's mother staggered slightly, as though the weight of Fadek's words had struck her physically. "My widowed mother was so moved," Fadik pressed on, "that she called me and said, 'Bring Rhoda to me. I want to speak with her.'" Fadek's voice softened, as if lost in the memory. That conversation changed everything. That night, the three of them, my mother, my brother, and Auntie Rhoda, came up with a plan. She looked directly into Aikenwale's mother's eyes. A plan of adoption. Aikenwale's father frowned, confused. "Adoption?" "Yes," Fadik nodded firmly. "My mother adopted Rhoda as her daughter. She became a part of our family, not by blood, but by something stronger. Love, trust, loyalty." The room pulsed with tension. "Then Rhoda, my mother, and I stripped ourselves of everything we had. We left our city behind, came to this place, rented a single room, and began to live false lives. Aikenwale's father blinked. False lives? What do you mean? Fadek's lips curled in a half-smile. We made a vow. We decided to hide Rhoda's wealth, her power, her influence. We asked her to play lazy and useless, so that no man would ever approach her for what she had, but for who she truly is. Please subscribe. Another collective gasp rippled through the family. Aikenwale's mother stumbled back a step. You mean all of this was planned? Fadik nodded again. Then she turned to Aikenwale, locking eyes with him. Sir, I was the one who invited her to your party. Silence. I was working in your company as your personal assistant then, and I was not surprised to see you, hooked by her lazy charm. Aikenwale's mouth twitched upward, a small, knowing smile. Because for the few months I was with you, sir, I knew exactly what kind of woman you were looking for. Aikenwale raised an eyebrow, amused. Oh, really? Fadik grinned. Sir, do you remember when I resigned? Aikenwale frowned slightly, thinking. I resigned exactly 3 weeks after you and Rhoda started dating. A flicker of realization crossed Aikenwale's face. Fadik continued. I left so that you would not be able to discern our plot, so that you wouldn't suspect a thing. Now, every single person in the family, except Aikenwale, exclaimed in shock. Ah! Ha! Ha! Gasps. Murmurs. Disbelief. But Aikenwale, he simply smiled. A slow, warm, knowing smile. Then, with deep appreciation in his voice, he said, Fadik, well done. Well done. You did a good job. He took a step forward, looking around at the grand hotel that now bore the name of Aya Araik. Then he looked back at Fadik. So, you resumed here? At Araik Intercontinental Hotel. Before she could answer, a deep, baritone voice suddenly filled the air, flowing from the overhead speakers. As the rich, baritone voice announced, Your meals are ready. The delicate ladies of Aya Araik Intercontinental Hotel suddenly appeared, gliding forward like celestial beings. Their elegance, their precision, it was as if they were choreographed by the gods themselves. They led the Aikenwales into the grand royal sapphire dining hall, a breathtaking space with cascading golden chandeliers, soft jazz humming in the background, and the tantalizing aroma of exotic cuisines floating in the air. The family took their seats at the imperial table, a custom-made dining set imported from Italy, its polished surface reflecting the dazzling lights above. The chairs, handcrafted with velvet cushions, cradled them in comfort, making them feel like royalty. Then, the magic began. A delicate truffle-infused lobster bisque, served in handcrafted porcelain bowls, was placed before them. The aroma alone was intoxicating. The moment the first spoonful touched their tongues, an explosion of flavors danced through their senses, smooth, creamy, and infused with a depth that seemed to whisper secrets of the ocean. Paired with the soup was an amuse-bouche of caviar and gold-dusted prawns, a single bite of paradise. Just as they were trying to process the wonders of the first course, the next dish arrived. Smoked duck breast with raspberry glaze, served with a side of butter-roasted asparagus and truffle mashed potatoes. The duck was perfection. Juicy, tender. The raspberry glaze added a delicate sweetness that sent shivers down their spines. Aikenwale's father, already dazed, whispered, This is not food. This is a spiritual experience. Then came the main course. A choice between gold-crusted Wagyu steak, medium rare, served with a side of caramelized onions and a rich, velvety Bordeaux reduction. Grilled Atlantic salmon with lemon butter sauce, resting on a bed of asparagus risotto. Jollof rice royal, made with the finest basmati, slow-cooked in a firewood-smoked tomato reduction, served with succulent, perfectly spiced grilled lamb chops. The wine pairings, aged Bordeaux, vintage Dom Perignon, freshly squeezed tropical fruit blends. By the time they finished, their minds were floating. When they thought they could take no more, the final course arrived, the grand dessert collection. A tower of chocolate soufflé, so soft that a mere spoonful melted on the tongue. A vanilla bean creme brulee, its caramelized top cracking with a satisfying crisp. And finally, a surprise touch, a mini platter of pounded yam and egusi truffles, a Nigerian-French fusion never before tasted anywhere in the world. For 2 whole hours, they ate, marveled, gasped, sighed, and groaned in the most pleasurable culinary experience of their lives. It was as if they had stepped into Alice's Wonderland, except this was no dream. Suddenly, as if jolted from a deep, sweet trance, Aikenwale's father jerked upright in his seat and exclaimed loudly, "It's high time we left." Reality crashed in. The spell was broken. They all rose reluctantly, their bodies still tingling from the meal, as if their very souls had been nourished. Please subscribe. As they moved toward the lobby, Aikenwale approached one of the strategically positioned cashiers. A stunning lady, with skin like polished ebony and teeth as white as snow, sat gracefully behind a sleek computer. He cleared his throat. "Our bill." She smiled warmly. "Sir, all expenses paid." Aikenwale frowned. "By who?" She reached into a sleek locker, retrieved a gold-embossed check, and handed it to him. Aikenwale's eyes narrowed as he scanned the details. Then, he sighed out loud, turned toward Rhoda, and with a playful frown, he groaned. "Rhoda, my piece, you will not kill me too." As the Aikenwales made their way towards their cars, their hearts were still wrapped in the magic of Irresistible Intercontinental Hotel. But just before they could leave, two final events unfolded, ones that would be talked about for years to come. Out of nowhere, Funso, Aikenwale's 23-year-old cousin, suddenly turned back and rushed into the hotel. "Ah, Funso, what did you forget?" someone called after him. But Funso was already inside, his eyes locked on the delectable cashier lady, the one whose smile had nearly stopped his heartbeat when she told Aikenwale, "All expenses paid." Approaching her with a confident smile, he slid his phone number and complimentary card across the counter. "Please, call me anytime," he said in a deep, charming voice, winking slightly. The cashier lady chuckled, took the card, and gave him a knowing look. Just as he turned to leave, Aikenwale's mother caught sight of the exchange. She folded her arms and exclaimed with satisfaction, "Funso, I wo na ti bear." "Funso, you two have started." Laughter erupted from the entire family as Funso grinned sheepishly, quickly jogging back to join them. Then came Uncle Bode, the legendary food lover of the family, a man whose love for food was as deep as the ocean. He walked up to Fadik and, in a loud whisper that everyone could hear, he said, "Please, put my name on your VIP customer list. You will see more of me here. From today, this hotel is my second home." Before anyone could react, one after the other, the rest of the family started echoing, "And me too. And me too. And me too." Fadik chuckled, her eyes twinkling with amusement. "You are all welcome," she responded warmly. As they were about to step into their cars, Aikenwale's father suddenly asked, "By the way, Rhoda, how old is this hotel?" Rhoda turned towards him and replied calmly, yet with quiet pride, "It started operations 9 months ago, sir, but it has not yet been officially commissioned. I will bring the family an invitation when we are ready. Irresistible has never been here. She doesn't even know this place exists. Her reward is 30% of the profits made here, and the immortalizing of her name." There was dead silence. Then, Aikenwale's father let out a deep breath and muttered, "I hope she won't collapse when she sees this. Rhoda, you are unbelievably cruel." Before Rhoda could respond, Oyinda, ever bold, turned to Aikenwale's father and smirked. "And so are you, sir." She turned towards the rest of the family and added, "And so are every dead and living billionaire. Please subscribe." The journey to Irresistible house was meant to be straightforward, but Rhoda had other plans. Determined to teach them another lesson, she directed Aikenwale onto a longer, rougher route. By now, the sun had begun its descent, casting long shadows across the uneven road. The time was past 4 p.m., and Rhoda, seated inside Aikenwale's father's car, watched as Aikenwale gripped the steering wheel with growing frustration. "We are already late," he muttered under his breath, pressing down harder on the accelerator. The car sped forward at breakneck speed, weaving through the narrow, dusty road riddled with potholes and gallops. From the passenger seat, Aikenwale's father's voice rose sharply. "Aikenwale, slow down. This road is dangerous." But Aikenwale wasn't listening. His eyes were fixed ahead, determined to gain back the lost time. Then, bam! The car plunged into a deep pothole. A violent jolt rocked them inside, and before anyone could react, psh, one of the tires burst with a loud hiss, forcing Aikenwale to swerve abruptly. If not for God's intervention, they would have been involved in a serious accident. For a moment, silence filled the car. Then, Aikenwale's father exploded. "Did I not tell you to drive carefully?" Still gripping the wheel, Aikenwale sighed, frustrated. "Daddy, it's the road. The street kings arrive." Before they could even step out of the car, they noticed figures emerging from the shadows. A group of street urchins, young boys, scruffy but alert, surrounded them in a flash. But instead of trouble, the air was filled with cheerful voices. "Big man, big ogre, welcome. Madam, you fine dye. See as you fresh. Baba, anything for your boys." They praise-sang them with exaggerated gestures, clapping their hands and grinning widely. An unexpected kindness. Before Aikenwell could react, one of the boys stepped forward. "Ogre, make we help you to change the tire." Aikenwell glanced at his father, who nodded hesitantly. Within minutes, the boys worked effortlessly. They jacked up the car, removed the damaged tire, and replaced it with the spare. Their speed and efficiency were impressive. As soon as they finished, Rhoda made her move. Without hesitation, she dipped her hand inside her bag and pulled out a thick bundle of crisp, new Naira notes. Not less than 100,000 Nigerian Nairas. The street boys froze. Their eyes widened in disbelief. Then, pandemonium. "Jesus! Ah! Madamum! We don hammer!" They screamed with joy, jumping and clapping in sheer appreciation. Some rolled on the ground, others danced wildly, and a few just stood there, mouths open, as if Rhoda had just performed a miracle. Even Aikenwell's father, despite his earlier frustration, couldn't hide his amazement. "Rhoda," he murmured, shaking his head, "you are full of surprises. A grand arrival and a case of mistaken identity." Before they reached Ayerarike's house, Aikenwell took a moment to ensure that their convoy was complete and intact. All vehicles were accounted for, and with that confirmation, they proceeded to enter the street together, maintaining their dignified procession. The unexpected spectacle. Within minutes, the entire neighborhood came alive. A mammoth crowd began to gather along the roadside, drawn by the sight of the luxurious convoy snaking through their streets. Political consciousness ran deep in these parts. To them, such a display of wealth and power could mean only one thing: a top political figure was in their midst. Excitement spread like wildfire. Men, women, and children rushed out of their homes, waving and chanting at the top of their voices. "Your Excellency! Your Excellency! A.T.N. Power to the people! A.T.N. Power to the people!" Their voices rang through the streets, shaking the air with enthusiasm. Convinced that this was the convoy of their state governor, a minister, or one of their favorite political leaders, they lined up eagerly, waving handkerchiefs and fists in the air as they followed behind the train of exotic cars. Some even ran alongside the convoy, determined to catch a glimpse of the supposed VIP. It was a moment of electric excitement. Then, to their utter bewilderment, the convoy slowed down and came to a full stop. Their cheers began to die down as they realized where the cars had parked. In front of Ayerarike's humble house. A wave of confusion rippled through the crowd. Silence. They watched intently, their faces filled with growing curiosity. One by one, the doors of the magnificent cars swung open. People began stepping out. But to the utter shock of the gathered crowd, these were not the faces they had expected. They were not government officials. They were not political figures. They were not familiar celebrities. "Who are these people?" someone muttered in confusion. Murmurs spread through the crowd. They had cheered, followed, and hailed a convoy, only to realize they had no idea who these people were. Please subscribe.